See?
Wow, they
weren't joking.
They really are.
Should have brought the sunglasses.
Okay, how's it going, guys? So just a quick shout out to the guys doing the workshops at the back. It is a little bit noisy, so if you want to have conversations, please go on the outside, because you really are going to want to you really are going to want to hear what these incredible people have to say today. I think you can come back in at 3 o'clock and use the tables to do your workshops and your hacky stuff after. So just a note on that. So yeah, welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us today. So we're going to be talking about improving and 10xing the Bitcoin development experience. I've got some amazing panelists with me today. So my name's Connor. I work at Spiral. We're focused on improving the Bitcoin open source ecosystem via a number of different initiatives, some of which we'll kind of go into detail today. So we'll start by just getting to know our panelists a little bit today. So Steve, if you want to start.
Sure. Yeah, so I'm Steve Myers, and I'm a contributor on the Bitcoin Dev Kit project, and my work is sponsored by Spiral, as are a bunch of other developers on our project. So, and yeah, we'll talk about what BDK is in a bit.
Hey, I'm Steven DeLorme. I hang out in the Bitcoin design community. I guess I spent a lot of my time contributing to the Bitcoin design guide and other open source design-related projects in Bitcoin.
Hey, I'm Matt Corallo. I work on the Lightning Dev Kit project, sponsored by Spiral as well, or I guess work for Spiral. So our goal being to allow people to build custom Lightning nodes and Lightning integrations super easy, and we take all the hard work out of that.
Okay, awesome. Just another note, again, if you want to have a conversation, please leave the room, and you can come back in about 3 o'clock to do the workshops and stuff. But so we're going to talk about like improving the Bitcoin development experience. But before we talk about some of the projects that are aimed at doing that, let's talk about what the experience has been like over the past couple of years in trying to build Bitcoin wallets and other types of applications. Maybe Steve, if you wanna start.
Yeah, sure. So the way I came to the BDK project was that I had a solo project I was working on. I wanted to do something on mobile with a Bitcoin on-chain, multi-sig, and there's just not a lot of great options. You know, like there was some stuff in Java, but it doesn't work on iOS. And then, of course, a lot of them didn't have the latest modern features that you would want in a Bitcoin wallet. Teamed up with Alekos Fellini, and he's got, there's this great library that uses another library set of projects called Rust Bitcoin, which provide, all the primitives you need, and then, put together with another Rust Bitcoin project for mini scripts, so you get descriptor support, and, of course, SegWit and all, talking to different Bitcoin backends. It just basically gives you all the features. So then one of the things I focus on is making that available on mobile. So with Kotlin and Swift, so you can just as a developer, you just can pick up this library now and build a Bitcoin wallet for desktop or mobile.
Okay, awesome. And so some of these libraries that existed over the last couple of years, I'm assuming they haven't been as well maintained, and it requires like developers to operate at a very low level when they're trying to integrate Bitcoin and Lightning. Is that true?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of the other thing about having a library like BDK and LDK is that it's got sort of the best practices built in, implemented in a way that a lot of people have looked at, and you don't have to necessarily be a bits and bytes Bitcoin developer.
Okay.
You can understand the API and just use it with a whole community kind of supporting you behind it.
Okay, awesome. And Matt, you've been around in Bitcoin development for some time. Like, how do you kind of see how Bitcoin development has kind of historically?
Yeah, so I mean, I came at this from I worked on Bitcoin Core for many, many years, and have now kind of moved over to the Lightning space. Historically, when I started working on Bitcoin 11 years ago or something, there weren't any funding for Bitcoin Core developers. There weren't even any full-time Bitcoin Core developers. Now that, obviously Bitcoin Core can always use more resources probably, but that's kind of a solved problem. There's a ton of people working on Bitcoin Core. Bitcoin Core has a lot of really smart people working on it. There's room to grow, but everything further up the stack doesn't, right? And so BDK has been really awesome. Steve talked about all these like libraries that have been kind of one-offs that people have thrown out in various languages, and they're not well maintained, and they're not really all that usable. And so having a common base for on-chain stuff is awesome. But we looked at it as the Spiral team, and we also concluded like there needs to be something like this for Lightning too, right? Is that Lightning is even more complicated than the on-chain stuff. There's even more to get right. There's even more to do. And we've seen several kind of mobile Lightning wallets. We've seen several Lightning wallets come around, and it's a full-time job for a team of 3 or 4 people to not only build a Lightning implementation, but actually keep up with all of the changes happening in Lightning and everything going on in Lightning. And so our goal is to kind of abstract that out, right? And there's make it so that you don't need a team of 4 full-time engineers to build a great Bitcoin wallet, where there's frankly some work to be done, right? There's some good wallets out there that need to grow, need to add Lightning support, need a little better UX here or there, need a little better design help from the design community folks, and we want to see a lot more, especially things like Bitcoin Beach Wallet, things like where there's like a localized community that has some local features they might need, or where integration with some local services makes more sense, and really enable people to build good user experiences around Bitcoin that, that it's just, currently you have to be a great low-level engineer to do that. And finding a great low-level engineer who's also good at building UX and good design is not, basically it doesn't exist, right? And so trying to abstract away that low-level stuff so that we can do all that work for you, and then you can focus on how do you build a great user experience.
Okay, amazing. And so it's, round of applause. It's like, it's this idea as well of like allowing people who operate at different levels in the stack to really specialize in specific areas. So like you say, if you're a protocol engineer, you can operate and build the tools that make it easy for application developers who build front ends and who work with more UI and UX focused people. They can really hone in those areas. So we've kind of identified that the developer experience is something that is pivotal to 10xing the Bitcoin development experience. Steve Myers and Matt Koala, you're working on some projects to do that, one being the BDK and the LDK. So do you want to explain to the people what the BDK actually is?
Right, so BDK stands for Bitcoin Dev Kit, the name inspired by LDK, which had the similar name. And the idea that we're focused is on building descriptor-based wallets. So these are on-chain wallets, and you basically get all the modern features. You have, like I said, so descriptors are a way of defining the spending conditions for a wallet, but it provides you a way to create those scripts in a way that's portable between different wallet implementations, as well as well-reviewed and audited. Like you can easily look at a descriptor and figure out what it does. For some more complicated spending conditions, as Matt was saying, people might want to build applications for specific communities, but it could also be like you're a company and you want to build something in-house that uses Bitcoin. You can now, you don't need to have a bunch of Bitcoin protocol engineers in-house. You can take this library. It's going to be reviewed by, the Bitcoin community. You can contribute back to it if you have more features. We had one person that was contributing back to our project, and he had a use where he wanted to do proof of reserves. So he could easily, within his company, create a proof of reserves library using BDK, and then release it both open source. And now any company that has that need can use these 2 libraries together. This is like an example of somebody that didn't have to start from scratch. And it's a really important thing too that a lot of things are changing on LDK, but things are still changing on BDK too. Taproot is coming out. It's going to be difficult for somebody to implement a Taproot wallet from scratch, but you start with BDK, and BDK is going to be supporting Taproot. Now you can just immediately get that feature in whatever application you're building. So that's part of the power.
Fantastic. And on the LDK side?
Yeah, so basically the same thing, right? but on the Lightning side, right? So the Lightning protocol, like I mentioned, it's complicated and it's really hard to get right, and it's really important you get it right. If you get it wrong, you or your customers lose money, and that's not a great user experience. So we try to do something similar where we do all of the Lightning state machine, we do all of the logic around how you route payments and how you even forward payments if you're running a non kind of mobile node, and do all of that stuff, and then we expose it as kind of the individual building blocks, and they all work well together, and it's easy to hook them up together. Or you can separate them out, and you can say, I'm going to run the routing part on a server, and I'm going to query that from the client, and then I'm going to do my backups by doing live updates against iCloud or whatever you want to do. We give just neat little interfaces for all of the different pieces that aren't kind of core to Lightning, but like how do you store your data? How do you, where do you get your private keys from? How do you sync the chain? All these kinds of things that you could have many different ways you want to do it. We provide just interfaces for that, and you have to go kind of hook it up to the right places, but you don't have to do all of the kind of hard work of building a Lightning state machine. And so we do that in Rust as well, and then have like BDK language bindings in a number of different languages, and more continuing to come, so that developers can kind of focus on how they want to build a Bitcoin application and how they want to have the UX work, and we can just kind of make it easy to hook it up and have Lightning suddenly running.
Okay, amazing. And you have developers working across various different stacks, whether it be on desktop, on mobile, on embedded devices, whatever it might be, also working in different programming languages as well. So how do you approach trying to accommodate for all of those different types of users?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good point. That it's one thing to have a nice, well-reviewed, feature-rich Bitcoin and Lightning stack, but then it's a whole other thing to support that ecosystem around it for mobile. So you have to have, you have to support Android, you have to support iOS, and in those environments, you want to support those languages. So you need to support Kotlin or Java on Android, and you want to support Swift. That's sort of like just, that's sort of the price of admission is you just need to support that. And to do that, as well as supporting the core library, gives you that just kind of easy, pick it up off the shelf, and you can start building your app, whatever environment you want, which is hard for, it's just sort of building that ecosystem just opens it up for everybody.
Cool. And I think like the technical term we kind of use is like language bindings, and like, Matt, what would be some of the challenges around language bindings and supporting like these various environments?
Yeah, I would say, supporting different environments and thinking hard about different deployment scenarios is like 60% of the work we do, and the other 40 is actually doing Lightning stuff. We built a language bindings framework from scratch. We sat down and said, like, all of these existing languages, we have a rich object-oriented interface with different classes and different interfaces that you have to plug into and use, and we want to support that in different languages. Turns out there are no language bindings frameworks that support this. It just doesn't exist. All the existing language bindings frameworks are for people who are saying, like, well, I've got my app and it's written in Java or Swift or whatever, and then this one function is too slow, and I have an implementation in C I want to call, and it's like one function and it's a pure function, and it doesn't have all of these interdependencies or whatever. And there's a ton of frameworks for that, and they're really great. And then you want to have like, well, I have these classes and I want native, I want it to feel like a native interface where you're like instantiating these classes that are secretly written in Rust, but they're actually, exposed to you in Java or Swift. And then you have interfaces that you want to write an implementation of in Java that like the Rust code is actually calling all the way into. It turns out that didn't exist. So we spent about 2 years of engineering time, a little more, actually building that from scratch. It's an insane amount of work, but it ended up working really well. And so, CashApp shipped with LDK powering their Lightning node, and they didn't write a single line of Rust. They didn't look at a single line of Rust. They wrote it all in Java, or I guess they wrote it all in Kotlin. But so that turned out to be a good investment. It worked incredibly well at the end of the day. But that ends up being almost all of our work is a combination of that, and also just thinking about how do we design an interface that is hard to misuse? How do we design an interface that's either going to like immediately spontaneously combust and the application won't even run, or it works right and you can't lose money and the payments go through reliably, and it all works, right? So you want to trying to design interfaces is a hard art form, right? And so that ends up being the other half of our work is just how do we make sure that this interface is going to be robust and users are going to know how to use this correctly just by looking at it, they can't screw it up, right?
Yeah.
Actually, LDK also provides great documentation, API documentation as well as examples. That's the other thing BDK also tries to provide is examples, documentation, which is another big piece of work. It's not, you can't take it for granted that every library would have that.
Yeah, awesome. Okay, so Stephen, we've not heard from you just yet, but you come from a slightly different perspective, being a designer. So do you want to talk to us a little bit about the Bitcoin design community, what that is, what that effort is, what type of things are involved on that side of things, and then we'll dive into a bit of how we tie the fact that we have these awesome SDKs and with the UI expertise that comes from that community as well.
Yeah, so the Bitcoin design community is just kind of a decentralized community of designers and creatives who are interested in working on open source Bitcoin. I guess the kind of central thesis of it would be that Bitcoin is the best money, so it should have the best user experience. I think a lot of people would agree that it's currently lacking. A lot of people find Bitcoin difficult to use. There's a lot of uncertainty for people about how to self-custody their own Bitcoin. Kind of the flagship product of the design community is this project called the Bitcoin Design Guide. And the Bitcoin Design Guide is, you can think of it kind of as like human interface guidelines for Bitcoin products. If you're building a non-custodial Bitcoin product, you can turn to this guide to look for principles and techniques that you can employ to build a better experience for your users. And like, it might be good to differentiate a little bit. Like you said the word UI. It's also, I think, important to differentiate between like UI, like just the thing that the user sees on screen, like the specific color of the button or the font choice, right? That I consider to be more UI, but like UX, I consider to be a little bit more broader than that. Like we're trying to think about like the whole experience the user has to go through. Is the application you're building, let's just say it's a wallet, for example, when they turn it on for the first time, do they know what they're supposed to do? When they receive their first Bitcoin, is there a backup facilitated? How is the user still using it a year down the road? Are they still using it 5 years down the road? And is the way that they're using it changing? So these are kind of like all things that I would consider kind of under the umbrella of user experience. And I guess kind of like similar to LDK or like BDK and LDK is that if you think about like why should every single developer have to repeat the same work over and over again? Like let's find what works. Like let's build our good Lightning state machine and just put that into a toolkit and everybody can use that. Similar with design, like we don't need everybody to come up with a new design solution every time. Like if some other wallet or Bitcoin service has come up with a good design solution that makes it really easy to use for people, why don't we document that in an open source way, and then other projects can take advantage of that.
Amazing. And just to touch on a few things around like the design guide and kind of documenting patterns that work regardless of what wallet you're trying to build or what Bitcoin application you're trying to build. Do you want to talk maybe about a concrete example and one that was announced earlier by Miles and the CashApp team, the BIP21 URIs, and like how that's an example of developers and designers who have created this standard and getting some aid, I guess, from the UX side to kind of tie it together as like a concrete example?
Yeah, that's a good one. So if anyone didn't see the CashApp talk this morning, Miles announced a lot of cool features. But yeah, one of them in particular was this plan to kind of move to a new type of QR code, or using an existing type of QR code but differently. And this, there's been this big conversation about it in the Bitcoin design community and other open source Bitcoin communities about this. Like just as a real world example, I think many of us witnessed this last year in El Salvador, just the difference in payment formats. For example, you go into like a little bodega or pupuseria and you want to order something, and you ask to pay in Bitcoin, and there's usually some kind of toggle that they have to switch between an on-chain address QR code or a Bolt 11 invoice QR code or a proprietary Chivo QR code. And there's just not a lot of education. People aren't sure what to do in many situations. And you think about QR code, it's kind of like an ugly, human, unreadable thing. Like you can't look at a QR code and just like know what's inside of it unless it tells you. So that was a big problem, and there's been many people have tried to come up with solutions for that, like Galoy with Bitcoin Beach. They had kind of a solution that they were experimenting with these kind of QR codes on these signs, and they were trying to solve the same kind of problem, like how do you make it easy on the user. But I'm not sure exactly where the idea originated from. I first, I think, heard it from Pavlineks and John Zbahari and Steve Lee, some combination of those three. But basically, this idea of just taking a BIP21, which is this it's this payment URI format. It's been around for about 10 years. I think weren't you involved in it?
I think I might have written the original spec.
Yeah, I think I saw your name on the paper. But it's basically this idea where we can use this existing spec. We can put an optional parameter in there, put a Lightning invoice in there, and I think the spec was very forward-looking. Like you were kind of like predicting that people would want to use it in different ways, and we don't know how we're going to want to use it in 10 years. Well, this is an example of that. So we're now able to use this existing open source standard, and in the Bitcoin design community, we started experimenting with it. We built a website. We started documenting which wallets could support this standard and which don't, and we started reaching out to projects. And this is just an example of like, designers can get involved in open source, and you can go on GitHub and you can open an issue with a project and make a bug report or a feature request or suggestions for UI improvements. And so we've gotten pretty positive feedback. I mean, it's an ongoing discussion, but we've gotten very positive feedback. And even CashApp was able to get involved and have discussions with the Bitcoin design community about this project. So it's really cool thing if you think about like, if you have the best UI, the slickest UI, the best UX in the world for your wallet, if every other Bitcoin wallet out there is hard to use, it hurts you too. Like we're kind of all in this together when it comes to Bitcoin UX. So CashApp, I thought was really great that they got involved with the design community, got involved in these discussions, and now we've basically seen in a very short period of time designers and developers collaborating together to improve the UX.
Yeah, and I want to zone in on that last little thing you said there around developers and designers coming together. Like sometimes we term it like bridging the gap between designers and developers. Now that we have these development tools and a design guide, why is it important to kind of bridge that gap? Is it the fact that now we can get more experimentation happening quicker? Is it the fact that like those tools just naturally bring those two users together? Like, what would you say about that side of things?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of bridging the gap, I'd say I think this is like a running problem in software engineering and product development. This idea that like if you're trying to build something and you spend 6 months planning it out, and then 3 months building it, and then 2 months testing it, and then eventually by the time it gets to market, it's like the competitors beat you, or users, customers' demands have changed. So I think like what we've witnessed over the past several decades is just that development cycles for products are getting a lot I hate to use this word, but I guess you'd say it's becoming more agile. Like we're figuring out how to like ship features quicker. And so an important part of that is like you don't want a situation where like the designer is building this perfect layout, and then I pass it over to the developer, and then the developer kind of has their own interpretation of it, and then by the time it hits the market, it's something's been lost in translation. I think like on the open source side, what I've witnessed just in the design community is that like some of the most successful Bitcoin open source projects are one where the designers and the developers work very closely together, and they have like kind of a constant feedback loop. So like if you come in and you ask the designer like, can you solve this problem for me? What's the answer to my question? And then take it and run with it. Here's the thing, this isn't like a perfect science. Like, like there's not like one just answer to UI, because it's going to depend on like where you are in the world, what kind of customer you're trying to serve, what the needs of your community are. And so there's not just like, this isn't like, physics or something where we can like, absolutely define something down to a molecule. So the ongoing collaboration between the designer and developer, I think, is so that, you can test stuff, see what works, and just very quickly find what works for the product or for the customer that you're trying to serve.
Okay, fantastic. And so just to recap a little bit, we have the BDK, which is helping with on-chain Bitcoin functionality, exposing all these high-level APIs. Similarly, on the LDK side, if you want to integrate instant Lightning payments into any wallet or application, what types of applications and are we seeing being built with like BDK, and then we'll go on to LDK in a second. So yeah. So right now, we primarily have sort of example applications. I mentioned there was a bank looking to use, looking at BDK for some proof of reserve stuff. Kind of our big focus now is just getting more of the mobile stuff built out to support more mobile applications, and that's part of what I'm doing here, and the rest of the BDK team is doing, is just finding open source developers or finding closed source developers, anybody who wants to build something using on-chain Bitcoin, and getting to know them and getting to solve their problems with BDK. I don't think we have any big like commercial programs yet using BDK, but the goal is we hope to soon. Yeah, we're certainly, that's our goal, is to make that happen. Yeah. Okay.
And on the LDK side, we've been around for a little longer than the BDK side. And so CashApp was our first user to go live in a big way. It was actually the second user to start integrating over Torment back here somewhere from Blue Wallet, suffered through a lot of the pain of some of our very early alpha language bindings projects. And so they're more in flight as well. Obviously, building for mobile is just a little harder in almost every way, not only on the language bindings end, but also especially on the Lightning end. There's just so many more things you want to get right to have a really great user experience, especially as a non-custodial end user application. And so CashApp kind of beat them to the punch. It's a little easier to build a custom Lightning node that is just custodial than the non-custodial. But it kind of highlights the very different uses for LDK and projects like this, where CashApp is a large corporate. They have a ton of backend infrastructure that existed already for all of their existing. Obviously CashApp does a whole lot more than Bitcoin. And they really wanted a Lightning node that tightly integrated with all of that infrastructure, right? So using their own logging infrastructure, their own database infrastructure, their own node failover and hosting infrastructure, all of the stuff that they already had, they wanted their Lightning node to really integrate well with that. And just taking something like C Lightning or LND, which are great, but in running it off the shelf, it doesn't provide them that. Right, and so they wanted to build something super custom, and they were able to, in a number of months, put together a full Lightning node from scratch that used LDK to do all of the kind of Lightning parts, but then integrated and worked in exactly the way they wanted a Lightning node to work for them. On the other side, Blue Wallet, just completely different scenario, but again, where they already had an on-chain non-custodial wallet. They already synced the blockchain. They already had key derivation. They already had a backup system. They already had all of these pieces, and they didn't want to take something like LND and try to make it run on mobile and then sync the chain twice and have two separate key derivation systems and they wanted a Lightning node that worked with their existing infrastructure and actually integrated into the app, and not something that just was completely fresh from scratch, or was from scratch kind of for them. And so there again, this LDK where it's really just building blocks. We provide a bunch of different building blocks and some sample implementations, and you can take the pieces you want and hook them up in the way you want and end up with a Lightning node that works in exactly the way you want. So being able to build super tailored systems for exactly what you need is really kind of I would say the value of everyone standing on this stage is helping people build exactly what they need.
Yeah, it's interesting because although like sometimes we talk about like LDK having the sweet spot of like non-custodial mobile where there are like constraints on memory, storage, background tasking, all of these kind of things, we are seeing something like Sensei, which is I guess a Lightning node implementation based off of LDK as well, which we hope might be in the Umbral App Store soon, and it might be instances where although out of the box, it's not really designed to be like an out of the box node experience. Like you have the tools to make a custom node yourself, right? So that's really cool. And on the Bitcoin design side, although we talk about the user experience and getting developers to work with designers to build, customer facing stuff like wallets and other types of applications, what other things do we see from the Bitcoin design community around art and narrative and all of these kind of things?
Yeah, so I mean, there's a lot of different projects, in the design community other than just the design guide. Around art, I'd say, there's a whole channel in our Slack workspace where people post like art they're working on and stuff, which is really cool. We've gotten involved with other, there's a lot of just kind of, I guess, like collaborations, you'd say, which is basically somebody's doing a project on Bitcoin, they come to us and, they might need some help with something and, we'll put together a call and people in the community who might want to help this project can jump in and help out. And so, like on the narrative side, there was this Hello Bitcoin project that you were involved with, and it's kind of a video series that kind of teaches people the fundamentals of Bitcoin and why it's valuable. And several people in the community got involved with that and started working on the animation for that. And also just like with like wallet projects and stuff. I mean, there's currently a collaboration with Join Market. I think so there's a team working on trying to redesign the UI for Bitcoin Core, like the wallet portion of it. There's the Zeus wallet, which has been incredibly good collaboration. There's also just some kind of other flagship products next to the design guide would be like the UI kit and the Bitcoin icons kit, like Christoph, Ono, and Bosch. Like those are basically kind of toolkits you can use. So you can take the icons kit and install it as a Vue or React module and just instantly have icons for your Bitcoin product. You can use the UI kit. It's a Figma prototype. So you can basically rip screens from that and incorporate them into your project. It's kind of like why reinvent the wheel? Not to limit your creativity in any way, but it's a good starting point so you don't have to rebuild everything from scratch. So there's really just a ton of projects going on in the community. Sometimes new initiatives just kind of spring up out of nowhere without any central authority, which is cool.
Yeah, awesome. And then just trying to tie things back to 10x in the development experience. What advice would you give people who want to get involved in a space, whether it be contributing directly to BDK, LDK in the design community, or taking these tools and building applications themselves? Like any advice for these people?
I could say one thing that I know that on the design side, I used to work in enterprise software, and
Okay.
we basically never built anything until we had UX and UI, primarily UX actually,
Okay.
because that's like developers sometimes aren't great talking to users, and UX, that's part of what they do to bridge the gap, is they're basically collecting that user feedback about what does the user want to do, how do they want to use it, maybe they don't know what they want. And maybe what they want isn't actually what they want, what they think they want. So that's obviously part of it. But on the BDK side or on the on-chain side, just being able to take a library that's well-reviewed, has examples, allows you to kind of bootstrap whatever project you have. And then I think it's also, from the closed source world, you might have all these companies replicating the exact same software, and that's pretty inefficient. With open source and projects like LDK and BDK, you have all these people that want to do the same thing, all these smart people, that can just get together, combine forces, trade ideas back and forth. People all over the world, you're going to get a cross-section of developers that you could never, as a company, afford to buy. Like, they're not for sale, most of them. So you get that for free, and it's quite amazing. It's a resource that you can only get in an open source project. You're not going to get that on a closed source project.
Yeah.
So,
how about on the design side, if designers want to get involved?
Yeah, so on the design side, I mean, just from a purely tactical perspective, you go onto bitcoin.design, our website, you go to the contribute page and follow what it says there. You can join our Slack channel. You can add our calendar to like your Google or Apple calendar and all of that. But just to dig into that a little bit more, I mean, we do calls, talking about specific projects or issues, and it's all pretty open. So, I mean, I would really encourage you to just lurk. Once you get on a call and you can just hang out, you don't have to ask questions or be involved if you don't want to, and you can just kind of see how an open source community functions, and then jump in and contribute when you feel comfortable. And I'll just say that, like, I'd really encourage you to do it, especially if you're like starting out your career and you're thinking of doing an unpaid internship. I'd say don't do that, and I would say contribute to an open source project instead, because like Steve said, you're going to meet like people all around the world with different ideas. You're just kind of connected to this hive mind of ideas, and also like the open source contributions you make, people are going to see them. So it's not going to be like some proprietary thing that's hidden, and you have to kind of like hype yourself up. Like, people can see when you're doing your work in the open exactly what you're contributing, and those open source contributions, I think, will follow you from one job to the next.
Cool.
Definitely. And to maybe to summarize a little bit, like, there's a lot of focus in this space of like, oh, I want to contribute to Bitcoin Core. I want to contribute to like the lowest levels of the protocol, and that's awesome. Those spaces need as much contribution as they can get, as many eyes on it as they can get. But they also have, over the last few years, started getting a lot of eyes on it, a lot of contributors, a lot of great people working on those projects. And further up the stack, you see a lot of these awesome wallets that people have started building and that people use every day, and the real touch points for users on Bitcoin non-custodial have teams of 2 or 3 or 4 people, right? And these projects, they often don't even have a UX or a designer, or they have some contribution from the design community and are turning to that increasingly, and they don't have the resources to build out a lot of really awesome UX that they might want to build because they're too focused on some of these lower level things. And so there's a lot more room to contribute to some of these projects further up the stack, and make a much bigger impact on how people actually use and experience Bitcoin. Because these are the real touch points. People actually are using an app to receive their Bitcoin, and they're not using Bitcoin Core on a regular basis. And so I think there's a lot of room to contribute to these communities, certainly, especially the design community, and going out and actually working with some of these wallets. And then there's also just a lot of room to build great user experiences using Bitcoin. There's only probably a handful of wallets that people strongly recommend that have great UX. And go build another one. Go build something that's unique and has some other user experience that you think might win yet more people over to Bitcoin and give them really the experience that they want. And there's a lot of room in the space for that kind of contribution.
Awesome. And then just a kind of final closing thoughts from the 3 of you. What are you kind of most excited to see in Bitcoin development this year? And then just tell people where they can find your projects again, the projects that you're working on again. So maybe, Steve, do you want to start?
Sure. Well, I mean, as an on-chain library, I think Taproot's probably the most exciting thing right now, just from what you're going to be able to do with it and being able to support that in an open source, easy to accept sort of way. Yeah. If you want to go to bitcoindevkit.org, that's our website. You can get links there to the GitHub repository and also our Discord community. If you have questions or have ideas for an app, or you want to contribute to the project, you can chat with us there. We're around the globe, so there's always somebody around online there.
Awesome. And Stephen?
Yeah, I'm one kind of thing, I mean, obviously I'm excited about the unified QR code. Another thing I'm kind of excited is just like stabilized Lightning channels. I mean, obviously Bitcoin's the best money and it's what you want your savings in, but one thing I've just kind of seen, like with adoption in developing nations is that there's obviously this need for like having a little bit that's stabilized, for your weekly expenses. And I think the Overton window has kind of shifted around that conversation, and we've seen this like kind of explosion of ideas over the past 2 months here of just different ways of accomplishing that. So I'm really curious to see how, what the engineers decide is the right approach, but after the whole kind of rough consensus process. But I'm also curious to see what the design around that, how we solve those design problems. But yeah, you can, like I said, you can follow what we're working on in Bitcoin design just by going to bitcoin.design on the web.
Perfect. And Matt, to finish us off.
Yeah. Oh man, there's so many things going on in Lightning. All of the things. So yeah, on the LDK side, let's see, we're working on Bolt 12 integration. So improving the way people pay in Lightning to add to address a number of shortcomings in the user experience and a number of different ways people expect to pay, especially things like static invoices. So that's huge. Shipping ZeroConf and other features that are kind of needed for first-class good mobile user experience from what people expect from existing Lightning wallets. That's going to be huge. And just helping people start building a lot more Lightning wallets and a lot better UX, and helping people not have to spend 4 developers, 3 developers full-time just to maintain stuff, and actually enabling people to really start experimenting more with Lightning, start building more stuff, start extending more stuff, and getting to the point where we can start having people build good dollar-denominated Lightning channels on a mobile app. That's going to be awesome, but man, we've got a lot of work to do to get there. And yeah, so you can go to the lightningdevkit.org if you want to check it out, and we have a Slack and a Discord community because I don't know, we like making sure we're available to anyone who has questions. So you can join one of those. There's always someone around to answer questions, and like all these great folks, we try to be pretty hands-on and pretty available to answer any questions and to help you figure out what's going on and how best to build what you want to build.
Hey, you said it. We got a lot of work to do. Back to work.
Yeah, back to work. Thank you for listening. Really appreciate it. See you guys around.